The courtroom buzzed with the arrogant confidence of wealth and privilege. Bennett Thorne sat with Manhattan's most feared divorce lawyer, a predatory smile playing at his lips as he prepared to annihilate his wife and leave her with absolutely nothing. He thought she was just a simple housewife from a Wyoming backwater, utterly powerless in his world of steel and money. He thought crushing her would be easy. He was catastrophically wrong. The moment the heavy oak doors burst open and a fleet of black SUVs arrived with tactical security, everything changed. Bennett wasn't just divorcing a lonely housewife. He was declaring war on a dynasty he never knew existed. And today, they had come to collect. Before we go any further, we'd like for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring even more powerful stories like this one. Now, let's begin. The divorce proceedings of Thorne versus Williams were taking place in the Superior Court of Manhattan, a building that reeked of old mahogany and expensive desperation. To Bennett Ben Thorne, the smell was intoxicating. It smelled like victory. Bennett adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Italian suit, the Patek Philippe watch on his wrist catching the fluorescent courtroom lights. He was a handsome man in the way sharks are handsome, sleek, imposing, and utterly devoid of warmth. At 38, he was the CEO of Thorne Tech, a company he had built, he told himself, through pure genius and ruthless determination. He conveniently forgot the quiet woman who had believed in him when no one else did, the late nights she stayed up reviewing his pitch decks, the way she had nursed his wounded ego through every failed deal. "Look at her," Bennett whispered to his lead attorney, Arthur Pendergast. "She looks like she's about to faint. This will be over before lunch." Arthur Pendergast chuckled, a dry, rattling sound like dead leaves. "Standard procedure, Ben. We destroy her credibility, she signs the waiver for alimony, and she goes back to whatever small town you found her in." Across the aisle, Naomi Williams sat alone. She wore a simple lavender blazer that had seen better days, her natural hair pulled back in a practical bun. She looked small, tired. Her hands were folded on the nearly empty table in front of her, next to a single manila folder and a nervous young lawyer who kept dropping his pen. Judge Rebecca Bentley entered, and Arthur Pendergast rose like a serpent uncoiling. His opening statement was surgical, each sentence a carefully placed knife describing Naomi as a gold digger, a manipulator, a woman who contributed nothing and now wanted everything. Bennett watched for signs of breaking, tears, anything. But Naomi sat there with that same distant calm, her warm brown skin glowing softly in the courtroom light. It unnerved him slightly, but he pushed the feeling aside. Then came the fabricated evidence. Hotel receipts, credit card statements, text messages Bennett had created himself. Pendergast presented each piece with smooth confidence. A strange sound interrupted the performance. A quiet electronic beep. Naomi reached into her blazer and checked an old pager. She glanced at the courtroom clock, 10:00 a.m. exactly, then at her lawyer. "He failed the test, Timothy," she said quietly, her voice suddenly steady. Bennett frowned. Something about her tone had shifted. Before anyone could respond, the heavy oak doors exploded open. 6 men in tactical black suits flooded the courtroom, moving with military precision that made the bailiffs look like mall security. They positioned themselves along the walls, transforming the space from a court of law into something that felt more like a war room. The courtroom gallery gasped collectively, and then he walked in. A man in his late 60s, silver-haired with glacial blue eyes, moved through the doors with the inevitability of a tidal wave. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Bennett's Porsche, and carried a silver-tipped cane that looked less like a mobility aid and more like a scepter of power. Behind him strode a striking woman in a crisp white power suit, carrying a leather briefcase stamped with a gold lion crest. Behind them came 12 more lawyers in matching navy suits, moving in perfect formation like an invading army. The silver-haired man stopped in the center aisle. Every eye in the courtroom was locked on him. Even Judge Bentley seemed momentarily paralyzed. When he spoke, his voice was deep, commanding. "I am William Vanderquilt." The courtroom seemed to collectively inhale and forget how to exhale. Everyone knew that name. Industrial empires, political power, old money so old it had built railroads and financed wars. The Vanderquilts were royalty in everything but title. Bennett felt the blood drain from his face. Arthur Pendergast stuttered. "The the industrialist." William Vanderquilt didn't acknowledge him. He walked directly to Naomi's table, his cane tapping against marble like a countdown. When he reached Naomi, his stern expression softened into something tender. He placed one hand on her shoulder. "Hello, sweetheart," he said. Naomi stood, and the transformation was instantaneous. Her posture straightened. Her shoulders went back. Her chin lifted. The defeat evaporated like smoke. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong. "Hi, Dad." Bennett's chair toppled backward as he shot to his feet. "That's impossible. She's Naomi Williams from Wyoming, a nobody." "She," William interrupted, "is Naomi Vanderquilt. Williams was her mother's maiden name. She used it because she wanted to find a man who could love her for who she was, not for her inheritance. She thought she had found that man in you." His ice-blue eyes fixed on Bennett with contempt. She was wrong. The woman in white stepped forward, setting her briefcase down with a decisive thud. "Victoria Vanderquilt Sterling, senior partner, Sterling, Holt and Associates. We represent Ms. Vanderquilt." Victoria pulled a thick, bound document from her briefcase. "Your Honor, we are filing an immediate motion to dismiss Mr. Thorne's petition and introducing a countersuit for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit theft. Additionally, we are filing for immediate asset freezing." Judge Bentley found her voice. "On what grounds?" Victoria's smile was surgical. "On the grounds that Mr. Thorne has systematically stolen from his own company, a company my sister funded and currently holds controlling interest in." Bennett's laugh came out strangled. "That's insane. Thorne Tech is my company. I built it from nothing." Naomi looked at him, her voice quiet but terrifying. "Who funded your seed round for Thorne Tech, Bennett?" He answered automatically. "V Group Holdings. They gave us $3 million for." He stopped. His face went from white to gray. "V as in Vanderquilt," Naomi said, standing slowly. "My trust fund. I own 49% of Thorne Tech. My family trust owns another 12%. That's 51%, Ben controlling interest." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Arthur Pendergast frantically flipped through documents, his face the color of spoiled milk. Naomi took a step toward Bennett, then another. He actually backed away, his expensive shoes squeaking against marble. "I'm not just your wife, Bennett," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I'm your boss. And you're fired." Victoria continued. "As of 9:47 this morning, all of Mr. Thorne's personal and business accounts have been frozen pending investigation. Additionally, we are serving immediate eviction notice for the penthouse at 432 Park Avenue, a property owned by Vanderquilt Real Estate Holdings." Bennett swayed on his feet. "This is you can't. I have rights." William stepped forward, his cane tapping once. "Rights? You had the right to love a remarkable woman. You had the right to build something meaningful. Instead, you treated a queen like a servant. You stole from her. You planned to destroy her." Naomi stood inches from Bennett now. "With my money and my patience, both of which have run out." The shark had become prey. If this part makes sense, drop a comment with "I'm still here." And tell us what time is it in your location. Let's see who's really watching this far. Bennett's Porsche screamed through Manhattan traffic, running red lights. His hands shook on the steering wheel as he called his CFO. "Leonard, what the hell is happening?" Leonard Banks' voice trembled. "Ben, they're already here, the Vanderquilts. They're in the building, they have everything." The line went dead. Bennett's tires squealed into Thorn Tech's underground garage 15 minutes later. He sprinted to the biometric scanner. Access denied. User ID invalid. Two security guards approached his own guards. "Sir, we'll need to escort you upstairs." "Escort me? I own this building." "Not according to our updated protocols, sir." The elevator ride was silent except for his hammering heart. When the doors opened, his employees tracked him with their eyes, pretending to work. Whispers followed him like a wave. The boardroom doors stood open. Every board member was present, sitting around the mahogany table. At the head in his chair sat Naomi. She wore a tailored navy suit, her hair in elegant waves, her posture commanding. She looked like she'd been born in that chair. William reviewed spreadsheets with two men in expensive suits. Victoria tapped on a tablet. Leonard Banks sat in the corner, sweating, looking like he wanted to disappear. "You're in my chair," Bennett said, his voice strangled. Naomi looked up calmly. "I'm in the chairman's chair. Since I represent majority shareholder interest, this is my seat." William spoke without turning. "Mr. Banks has been very helpful. He confessed to helping you embezzle approximately $5 million over 3 years. Our auditors found it all in 10 minutes, Bennett. You weren't even creative about it." Victoria looked up from her tablet. 3 years ago, you took out a loan against your equity to cover Vegas gambling debts. The loan was held by Centurion Capital. Guess who owns Centurion? William raised one hand. "You missed 2 margin calls. We foreclosed this morning. Your shares are ours. You own exactly 0% of Thorn Tech." "All in favor of removing Bennett Thorn as CEO," Naomi said steadily. Every hand went up, every single one. Security guards appeared in the doorway. As they pulled him toward the door, Naomi spoke one last time. "You don't love me, Ben. You love the idea that you were better than me. Goodbye." Chapter 5. The FREFALL Bennett stood on the freezing Manhattan sidewalk in his shirt sleeves, the November wind cutting through expensive fabric like tissue paper. Security had kept his coat, they'd kept everything. He pulled out his phone with trembling fingers and opened his banking app. Balance, $0. He refreshed it, still zero. He tried his other accounts. Zero, zero. Zero, court-ordered asset freeze. A taxi pulled up and Bennett threw himself into the back seat. The Ritz, fast. Jessica would understand. Jessica would help. At the hotel, his Amex was declined. His Visa, his MasterCard. Every single card came back with the same humiliating beep. Bennett found a crumpled 20 in his wallet and threw it at the driver. He sprinted into the hotel, his $800 shoes slapping against marble as guests turned to stare at the wild-eyed man in the wrinkled suit. He burst into the suite. Jessica lay on the bed in a silk robe, scrolling through her phone. She looked up, saw his disheveled state, and her face went from bored to disgusted. "What happened to you?" "They froze everything." "Jessica, Naomi isn't who we thought. She's a Vanderquilt. Her family owns half of Manhattan." Jessica sat up slowly. "A Vanderquilt like the Vanderquilts?" "Yes, but listen, we can fix this. You have savings, right?" "We can go to Mexico," Jessica laughed. It was a sound like breaking glass. "Do you know why I'm with you, Ben? Because you bought me a Cartier bracelet. Because you promised to make me VP of marketing at 24. Because you're a winner." She pulled out her purse, checking her reflection. "But right now, you look like a loser, a broke loser." "Jessica, please. I have a date with Michael from the hedge fund. He's been texting for weeks. Now you're just bait." "Don't call me." The door slammed. A knock came moments later. Bennett rushed to open it, hoping Jessica had returned. Victoria Vanderquilt Sterling stood there flanked by 2 NYPD officers. She handed him an envelope. "Subpoena and arrest warrant. Charges include grand larceny, fraud, and embezzlement." The officers moved forward with handcuffs. "I have nothing," Bennett screamed as the metal clicked around his wrists. "You've already taken everything." Victoria's smile was surgical. "By the way, your credit card was declined for the room. They'll be holding your luggage. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. Chapter 6. The pivot Rikers Island smelled like despair and industrial cleaner. Bennett spent 48 hours in holding, surrounded by men who'd committed real crimes. He didn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Naomi's face transforming in that courtroom. Bail came from Marcus Chen, a gambling associate from Macau. The interest rate was 40%. Bennett didn't care. He emerged looking like a ghost, suit wrinkled and stained, graying stubble covering his jaw, bloodshot eyes sunken. An Uber X picked him up, not even an Uber Black. The Motel 6 in Queens smelled like cigarettes and broken dreams. Gary Finkel's office was upstairs above a laundromat. Bennett recognized him from bus bench advertisements. Injured, divorced. Call Gary. Finkel was 60, balding with coffee stains on his tie, but his eyes were sharp. We can't win on the fraud charges. The evidence is too solid, but we can win in the court of public opinion. The Vanderquilts are bullies. Old money crushing the little guy. You're the poor husband who was lied to. She entrapped you. People hate billionaires, Ben. We use that. 3 days later, Bennett sat across from Diane Mitchell on Morning Beat, wearing a humble gray sweater Finkel had bought at Target. He'd practiced the tears. They came on cue. I didn't know who she was, Bennett said, his voice breaking beautifully. I married Naomi Williams. For 10 years, I worked myself to the bone building our dream. And all that time, she was laughing at me, testing me, she called it. Diane leaned forward, concerned. And the embezzlement charges. A misunderstanding. I noticed irregularities in our accounts. I was trying to secure funds, to protect what we'd built. I didn't know the irregularities were her family manipulating everything from the shadows. He looked directly into the camera. The Vanderquilts destroy people for sport. I'm just a guy from Queens who tried to build a tech company. They're worth billions. Why do they need to crush me? By that evening, #Justice for Ben was trending on Twitter. Think pieces appeared. Billionaire's twisted game. When the rich hunt for sport, the narrative shifted like sand. Bennett became the victim, the underdog. Vanderquilt Industries stock dropped 2 points. Board members started calling, panicked. At the Vanderquilt estate, William threw a crystal tumbler at the television. I will buy that network and fire everyone, Victoria paced, tablet in hand. He's slandering the family name. We need to sue immediately. No, Naomi's voice cut through the chaos. She sat by the window, perfectly calm, watching the city lights. Let him talk. Let him build his tower. William stared at his daughter. Sweetheart, he's winning. Public opinion is turning. He forgets I lived with him for 10 years. Naomi turned, her expression serene. I know where he keeps the skeletons. Set up a deposition. Live stream it. He wants transparency. Her smile was sharp as broken glass. Let's give it to him. 2 weeks later, the Four Seasons conference room gleamed with polished mahogany and the cold efficiency of corporate warfare. News cameras lined the back wall. Bennett had insisted on it. He walked in with Gary Finkel feeling like a king returning from exile. The GoFundMe had raised $50,000 from sympathetic strangers. He wore a modest suit, his expression carefully crafted into wounded dignity. Naomi sat across the table, flanked by Victoria and Robert Graves, the lead Vanderquilt attorney, a man whose hourly rate could fund a small country. A camera blinked red. Graves began without preamble. Mr. Thorne, you claim you were unaware of your wife's wealth. Correct. I was trying to save the company. I had no idea my wife was the threat. And you claim you were a faithful, loving husband. Bennett looked directly at the camera. Absolutely. I loved Naomi. I would have died for her. Naomi reached into her briefcase and slid a USB drive across the table. It made a soft scraping sound that seemed deafening in the sudden silence. Exhibit A, she said calmly. From the cloud server of your personal phone, Bennett. Password 123 isn't very secure. Gary Finkel shot to his feet. That's invasion of privacy. Company property, Naomi replied. The phone was paid for by Thorn Tech. The data belongs to me. Graves inserted the drive into a laptop. Bennett's voice filled the room crystal clear. I tell you, Jess, it's almost too easy. The dumb cow doesn't suspect a thing. The silence that followed was devastating. The camera kept recording. Gary Finkel closed his notebook slowly and walked out without a word. 6 months later, the same courthouse was packed with media once again. But the frenzy had died down. Justice for Ben had been replaced by memes mocking his breakdown and think pieces about narcissistic abuse. Bennett Thorne shuffled into the courtroom in an orange prison jumpsuit, shackled. The prison barber had shaved his head. He'd lost 30 pounds, and his once sharp features were now hollow and gaunt. He looked 20 years older than 38. In the gallery, Naomi sat between William and Victoria. She wore a simple white dress, elegant without being ostentatious. Her natural hair was styled in soft curls. She no longer looked like a victim. She looked like a survivor, like a queen who had reclaimed her throne. Judge Bentley entered, her expression stern. Mr. Thorne, you have pleaded guilty to 3 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of embezzlement, and 1 count of perjury. You betrayed the trust of your investors, your employees, and, most egregiously, your wife. Bennett stared at the floor, his trembling hands folded. The prosecution has recommended the maximum sentence, and frankly, I see no reason to deviate. You are sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. 15 years was a lifetime in the white-collar world. Furthermore, restitution is set at $42 million payable to Thorn Tech and its parent company, V Group Holdings. Your assets have been liquidated, yielding approximately $3 million. The remainder will be garnished from any future earnings. The gavel came down like a coffin lid. Bram. As the bailiffs moved to take him, Bennett turned. For the first time in 6 months, he looked at Naomi. He didn't look angry or manipulative, just pathetic, broken. Naomi. His voice was raw, barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. Naomi stood slowly and walked to the railing. She looked at the man she'd wasted a decade on, searching within herself for anger, hatred, the desire for revenge. She found only distant pity. I know you are, Ben, she said softly. You're sorry you got caught. Tears streamed down Bennett's face. No, I had everything. I had you. Why was I so stupid? Naomi's expression remained calm. Because you thought power was something you took from others. You didn't realize that true power is what you give. I gave you everything, Ben, and you threw it away for an illusion. She turned to leave. Naomi, will you visit me? Naomi stopped. She glanced at her father, who gave her a supportive nod. She looked back at Bennett one last time. No, Ben, I have a company to run and a life to live. Goodbye. She walked out, her white dress flowing behind her like a banner of victory. The heavy oak doors closed with a definitive thud. Bennett collapsed to his knees. The shark had finally stopped thrashing. Outside, spring had come to New York. Trees along the courthouse steps were budding with fresh green leaves, and the city felt alive with possibility. Paparazzi lined the sidewalk, shouting over each other. Mrs. Thorne, how do you feel? Is it true you're the permanent CEO? What's next for the Vanderquilt empire? Naomi stopped at the bottom of the steps. She slipped on her sunglasses and looked at the sea of cameras with a calm smile. My name, she said clearly, is Naomi Vanderquilt, and what's next? She paused. Everything. The cameras went wild. Flashes exploded like fireworks. Naomi was already moving toward the waiting limousine, William's steady hand at her elbow, Victoria clearing a path. Inside the car, the chaos muted to a distant hum. William poured sparkling water into crystal glasses and raised his in a toast. You did good, kid. You handled him with grace, better than I would have. I would have bought the prison and turned off the heat. Naomi laughed, a genuine, happy sound that felt like breathing after being underwater too long. That won't be necessary, Dad. Living with himself will be punishment enough. Victoria flipped open her laptop. We have a board meeting at 3. Asian markets are opening. We need to discuss the Tokyo expansion. Naomi leaned back against the leather seat and closed her eyes. She thought of the small town in Wyoming where she'd tried to hide. She thought of lonely nights in the penthouse waiting for a husband who didn't care. She thought of the fear she used to live with, the constant terror of not being enough. She opened her eyes, bright with purpose. Let's do it. I have some ideas about Tokyo. And that is how Bennett Thorne learned the hardest lesson of his life. Never underestimate the quiet ones. He thought he was crushing a powerless wife, but he was actually waking a sleeping giant. Naomi didn't just win her freedom. She reclaimed her identity and her empire, proving that dignity and truth are the most powerful weapons of all. 2 hours later, Naomi Vanderquilt sat in the CEO's chair at Vanderquilt headquarters, the Manhattan skyline spreading out behind her like a kingdom waiting to be claimed. She was home. Not the home Bennett had tried to trap her in, but the home she'd been running from her whole life. The weight of legacy, the responsibility of power. But she wasn't running anymore. She picked up her phone and scrolled to Marcus Chen, V Group CFO. Ready to change the world, she typed. His response came immediately, been ready, just waiting for the right leader. Naomi smiled. Outside her window, New York hummed with possibility. Somewhere in a federal prison, Bennett Thorne was learning what it meant to lose everything. And here, in this moment, Naomi Vanderquilt was learning what it meant to finally, completely, unapologetically win. The queen had risen, and she was just getting started. From powerless wife to CEO of an empire, Naomi didn't just win, she dominated. If you loved watching Bennett get everything he deserved, smash that subscribe button. We've got more stories of karma served ice cold coming your way. Comment below, Team Naomi or did Bennett deserve a second chance? And share this with anyone who's ever been told they weren't enough. Let's build an army of people who refuse to stay quiet. See you in the next one.